Hello! Today it is time for the first half of my October wrap-up. I feel like now that I'm doing just one video a week that I'm doing a lot of wrap-ups, but you know what? I don't really mind that. I think they're my favourite videos to film. They're some of my favourites to watch, so I'm quite happy. I don't know why people diss on wrap-ups. Anyway, I read 4 books this month. Now, I'm not going to lie, it started on a bit of a dud note. Now, I picked up Angela Carter's The Magic Toy Shop. Now, can we just have a moment for this edition? These are the Virago Modern Classics, and they are absolutely stunning. They've even got pretty little apples on the inside and French flaps, and oh, they're just stunning things. I'm definitely going to get more in these editions, but the book itself was a real disappointment for me. I've been on a proper Angela Carter kick recently after reading The Infernal Desire Machine of Dr. Hoffman, I think it was called, or something along those lines, and also watching an Angela Carter documentary. I kind of felt like I'd found my soul writer, I suppose. You know, she's a person who I think wasn't afraid to go to crazy places, which I really appreciate in a writer. However, this book sadly wasn't weird enough for me. I think that's the only way I can describe this. And it actually put me a little bit in mind of how disappointed I was when I read Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. This book definitely had more charm than that. I think Jamaica Inn was just the flattest thing I have read probably ever. I just hated it. But this definitely had more charm, and I did finish this and not find that I was just skipping pages and pages. So in that sense, I think it was much better written than Jamaica Inn, but it kind of had that same feeling of I loved Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and then I went on to Jamaica Inn and I just couldn't get along with it. This was kind of the same vibe, and actually they have quite a lot of parallels. This is about a girl called Melanie whose parents die kind of in a roundabout way. I think she feels a bit responsible because when they are out for the night, she ends up going into her parents' room and trying on her mum's wedding dress, and she goes outside in it and ends up dirtying it and ripping it, and basically she feels like that's kind of why they've died. But she gets shipped off to her uncle who her mum fell out with. They never really knew him, and he kind of lives this odd life. He lives with this woman who doesn't speak, and her 2 brothers, and it's all kind of a little bit underlyingly dark, and basically he has a toy shop, but despite the title The Magic Toy Shop, this is completely devoid of magic. It's not magical realism in any sense. It is what it sounds like. It also goes down the incest path, which I spoke about recently. Is something I just don't like in books. It was fine, and there was some beautiful writing in it. As I said, it had much more charm than I found in Jamaica Inn, but overall it just left me feeling a little bit flat. It's not a book that I would particularly rave about at all. It was 3 stars, but I think I probably only gave it 3 stars because it's Angela Carter. If I'm being completely honest, it was probably closer to 2.5. I don't know, it just wasn't for me really. I think the trouble is as well, I went into this expecting that it was going to be kind of the crazy sort of flamboyant world that I'm used to from Angela Carter, and it just wasn't really. So yeah, a bit of a disappointment, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm keeping it because that edition is just gorgeous. Then I went on to a reread. Now this is on the recommended reading list for my Faber Academy course, and that is Zoe Heller, Notes on a Scandal. Now I read this when I was about 19, and I remember feeling as though it was a book that I could really love later on, but I didn't feel like I was at that stage in my life when I read it, which I can completely understand from rereading it. So there's a lot in here that probably at 19 years old you wouldn't pick up on or you wouldn't appreciate, especially not where I was with my reading when I was 19, but I so appreciated this time around. I think it also helped because I was reading it in order to analyse the writing a little bit and sort of think about how it's written, and this is a really cleverly written book. So this follows a woman called Sheba who is having an affair with a 15-year-old student at her school called Connolly. The story is told from the perspective of another teacher at that school called Barbara, who is kind of very close to Sheba. And she's kind of Sheba's confidant. She knows about the relationship, and basically she's telling the story of this relationship from effectively what she's imagining happened, and also obviously snippets that Sheba has given her. On the outset that might seem like a little bit of a strange storytelling choice, and I think this is what I thought when I read it the first time, that it kind of felt too removed from what was happening, because on the surface of things the focus should be surely this relationship between Sheba and her student. But ultimately this is not a story about their relationship. This is just a story predominantly about Barbara, I would say. She's a really strange and dark character, and she has a little bit of an obsession with Sheba, and she's got quite a compulsive personality. She's not, I wouldn't say, she's kind of pegged as an unreliable narrator, and I wouldn't specifically say that. I suppose she is unreliable in the fact that she's portraying these things as fact, but then at the same time you know that she wasn't there, so you know that to a certain extent she's elaborating on what happened. I wouldn't necessarily call her an unreliable narrator, but she certainly paints things in a kind of twisted light, and she looks at things in a very strange and unhealthy way. And yeah, it's basically just about her view of this relationship. And I think what's really interesting is that yes, we are outside of that relationship and we're always kind of one step removed, but I think that kind of really shows us how Barbara's feeling, how she's feeling like she's always one step away from Sheba, and how she kind of wants to break down that barrier, and Connolly is that barrier to her. And oh, it's just so good. There's so much in here. And also Barbara is frankly a terrible person. I mean, Sheba's not great, but Barbara's actions are just terrible at times. Kind of always tries to get Sheba alone. She twists things so that Sheba kind of comes to her and confides in her, and she very much twists the story so that she's the good guy, and it's just so dark. But at the same time I kind of really like Barbara. I think there are parts of Barbara that I can just completely relate to, like just her nights at home and kind of her loneliness and her awkwardness as well around other people. There's a point where she meets Sheba's daughter, and her reaction to Sheba's daughter is just hilarious because she's just sort of completely awkward and inept in social situations, and I am completely with Barbara on that one. But yeah, I would recommend it. It's not what you might expect going into it, but I think it's actually so much more than that, and it's ultimately just a study of human loneliness, I suppose, and the lengths that loneliness in all different shapes and sizes takes us to. Then I picked up, this is a library book that I've had for so many months now, and that is Arcadia by Ian Pearce. I mean, it is big. I forgive myself for having put it off for this long, but I'm also so glad that I got to this. So if you want a really clever and in-depth review of this, I will link down below the review that Jen Campbell did a few years ago. She's kind of the reason that this was on my radar, because she absolutely loved it and she picked up all the intertextuality and all of the things in the book that probably didn't really come to my attention because I'm not as analytical with my reading, I suppose. So I would really highly recommend watching her video if you want to check this out. But regardless, I adored this. Just reading it on like a surface level, I thoroughly found it so much fun. So this is going to be quite difficult to explain. It's effectively about stories within stories. So predominantly we have a world which is set way in the future, when a woman called Angela has discovered a way to, she claims that she's discovered a way to travel in time, but the organisation that she's working for is saying that she's wrong, that she has not discovered a way to travel in time. She has in fact discovered a way to access alternate universes. But Angela's argument is that you can't have alternate universes, you can only have one reality, and you can move around within the time of that reality. And basically Angela gets fed up, I suppose, of the way they are treating her, things that they are putting her through, and she ends up using what she has discovered to go back in time to the 60s, in the time frame of a man called Henry Lytton, who is writing a book which kind of is just I suppose a framework for a new world. It's not a plot per se, it's just the framework for this world, how this world would work, the people who would be in this world. And the story kind of goes from there. I don't want to go into it too much because it could be a bit confusing if you're not actually reading it, but effectively Angela, in Henry Lytton's time, she effectively develops a prototype which she bases on Henry Lytton's creation. So she effectively brings his other world to life, just to see if she can. And a girl called Rosie, who looks after Lytton's cat sometimes, ends up stumbling into that world, and because she stumbles into it, she starts time there moving. So before it was just a prototype, it was kind of a stagnant thing because Henry hadn't given this world any plot, he hadn't given it any drive, there was no narrative, it was just kind of existing. But Rosie goes in there and she kickstarts things because she says hello to people, and when you say hello to somebody you start a reaction, they will say hello back, and that kind of kickstarts all of this crazy stuff. We also follow the people who are in the future and they are trying to find out where Angela's gone. Basically, I just loved this. It sounds confusing, and I have to say for the first 100 pages, which is quite a long time, I was thinking it was going to be a DNF for me because it takes quite a while for the story to get set up. I don't know if that's because of the mindset I was in, because I kind of went into it thinking that I might not enjoy it. So it did take me a long time to get into this, and I was kind of forcing myself to pick it up, and I kind of had no real idea what was going on for the first 100 pages, but then you start picking up on these little things and these little hints that are showing you what's actually happening. And I just think it's really clever, and it's such a fast-paced and fun read. It's one of those books that you can just fully immerse yourself in. I think what I really enjoyed about this as well is that it kind of looks at the art of storytelling and what we do when we tell stories, and also how we tell stories. So for example, there's a bit in here where Henry Lytton ends up going into his creation and he meets his characters, and he's sort of talking to his characters and explaining why he made them who he made them, and sort of apologising to the people who he knows that he just brushed over, or sort of, I suppose, confronting his narrative and seeing the plot holes right in front of him. And as a writer, I just thought that was hilarious, and it's just so good. I think if you like stories and if you like books, and if you're willing to put a little bit of work in to work out what's going on, I would just recommend this. It was so much fun. It put the biggest smile on my face when I finished it, which was exactly what I needed. So I thoroughly enjoyed this one. And then throughout the month, there's also on my Faber Academy, we have some writing books that are recommended reading. So I was reading Richard Skinner's Writing a Novel, which I think is effectively an outline of the course basically, but you don't have to be on the Faber course to pick this up. I got this off of Amazon, and I would highly recommend this, to be honest. There are some chapters in here which are really lovely. And this book kind of had me at hello, because the first chapter is about what is writing really about. And effectively in that, Skinner kind of just looks at the fact that writing is about what you want to write about, it's what you're passionate about, it's what you love writing, about the heart of writing effectively. And I think a lot of books like this, because it's not, you know, a writing memoir or anything like that, it is a how-to guide for writing, and I think a lot of books like this make the mistake of being about writing for the market or writing for the audience, and I think those kind of books are a bit heartless and they instantly turn me off. Ultimately, every writer knows that writing for the market just doesn't work. If you don't love what you're writing, it's not going to sell. It's not going to be something that's enjoyable to write, and it's not going to be something that's enjoyable to read. So I'm always skeptical of books that start like that. But this absolutely had me at hello with that first chapter. And then it just goes on to discuss a few basics of writing. So there are things like point of view, how you decide to tell your story. There are things like planning, how you build characters, and this is just all the normal stuff that you would expect to find in a writing book. Again, like I said with the last writing book I read, this didn't necessarily teach me anything new, but I really liked Richard Skinner's writing style, and I would recommend this one. It's only short, and it was just a nice, refreshing kind of look at the heart behind writing, and I quite enjoyed it. So that's what I have read so far this month. It's been a bit of a mixed bag. As I say, the Angela Carter was a real disappointment, but it has got better since then. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these and what you are reading at the moment, and I will see you next time. Bye!